Hi guys, welcome back. So in this video we will talk about sustainability, and it would be the last topic for this course, and in the next week I would just post 2 videos about the final exam review. And here is an outline for this video. First, we need to define what is the sustainability. It refers to maintaining the ability of the environment and our society to continue to produce and satisfy needs and wants into future. So if you wonder if something is sustainable, you can ask yourself, can we do this over and over again forever? If the answer is yes, then it is sustainable. And we need to keep 3 things in mind at once when we think about the sustainable. The first one is social progress, and then economic development, then climate and environment. So here is a graph to help us keep all those 3 things into consideration. In a truly sustainable environment, an ecosystem would maintain populations, biodiversity, and overall functional ability over an extended period of time. Similar to environmental sustainability, economic sustainability involves creating economic value out of whatever project or decision you are undertaking. In most cases, projects and decisions must be made with the long-term benefits in mind, rather than just short-term benefits. And when we only consider the economic aspects of something, it may not promote true sustainability, because we also need to think about the impacts of the economic activities on our environment and our society. Social sustainability is based on the concept that a decision or project promotes the betterment of society. So in general, future generations should have the same or greater quality of life benefits as the current generation do. This concept also encompasses many things such as equal opportunity to the education, safety food and medicine, human rights, environmental law, public involvement and participation, and so on. So the key point is that when we make any decisions, any economic or environmental decisions, we cannot just think one aspect. We need to think all those 3 aspects into consideration, and that is the meaning of sustainability. This graph shows all possible development paths. The y-axis represents human well-being, and the x-axis represents time. When the well-being is increasing continuously or constant, then we call the development path is sustainable. So in this graph, there are 3 sustainable paths, B, C, E. For B, it is increasing all the time, so it is sustainable. For C, it increases first and then becomes constant, so it is also sustainable. For E, it is constant all the time, then it is also sustainable. So that is what I mean. The well-being is increasing continuously or sustained. But for A, we can say it is also increasing, right? But at a certain period of time, the well-being decreases. So the development path for A is not sustainable. For others like D, F, or H, so they also increase at first and then decrease, so they are not sustainable. And when we want to make a sustainable decision, we need to think several questions in advance. First, the current well-being level. So see this graph again. Here is our current well-being level. So when we are talking about the well-being is increasing, continuously or constant, we are comparing the future well-being to current well-being. So if the future well-being is greater than the current well-being continuously, then that one is sustainable. And we also need to think about the sensitivity of future well-being level to actions by previous generations. Then I'm going to talk about the 3 competing paradigms on sustainability. So the first one is discounted utilitarianism. The goal for this one is to maximize the present value utility over time subjected to resource constraint. So mathematically, we need to discount to solve the optimization problem. So for this type of sustainability, the discount rate is very important. And remember, when we talk about the discount rate, when we solve the dynamic problem, we just put more weight on current period consumption and consume less in the next period when there is resource constraint, right? So that also means the discount is very important here. Why? If there is no discount, means if there is no scarcity resource, then we can consume as much as we can, and it doesn't matter we consume in this period or next period. However, there is a drawback of this method. The decision maker does not take the technological change into the consideration, because in the future there must be more advanced technology. So the efficient allocation of resource may be different when we take the technological change into consideration. So that is the discounted utilitarianism. So the next type of sustainability is Rothschild principles and intergenerational equity. So from the Rothschild's principle, we need to maximize the minimum outcome for the future generation. That means we need to make the worst outcome as good as it can be. And we also call that veil of ignorance. It takes the decision maker to make a choice about a social or moral issue and assumes that they have enough information to know the results of their possible decisions for everyone, but they may not know which person they are. The theory contends that not knowing one's position in society would lead to the creation of a just system, because the decision maker would not want to make decisions which benefit a certain group at the expense of another one, because the decision maker could theoretically end up in either group. So that is also called the Max-Min principle. So according to Max-Min principle and the veil of ignorance, we should say, or this model implies that each generation should leave to the next at least as many resources as they possessed at the start. So in a non-renewable resource economy, that also implies that we need to maintain constant consumption of that non-renewable resource, because we are following the Max-Min principle and we are not sure which generation we are in. And in this slide, I talk more about the veil of ignorance. And that is the key point of Rothschild principles and intergenerational equity. So people behind the veil of ignorance, they do not know who they will be in this new society. And any choice they make in structuring that society could either harm them or benefit them. If they decide that 10% of the population would be slaves to the others, they cannot be surprised if they find themselves to be slaves. And no one wants to be part of a disadvantaged group, so the logical belief is that the veil of ignorance would produce a fair society. However, for this method, defining equity is very difficult. So consider the climate adaptation. So it would be very hard for us to tell each country or region's responsibility for climate change, for climate adaptation, or how much they should reduce their pollution. And there are several methods we can use. For example, we can decide each country's abatement level based on their GDP, and also we can decide the abatement level based on their emissions. There are also other principles or other methods to decide each country or each area's responsibility. However, it is hard to say which one works best. The third principle for sustainability is called the Green Golden Rule. So for this method, following this principle, we need to maximize long-run sustainable utility from consumption and the environment. So different from the first principle, this one focuses on the future rather than the present value. So we need to think everything in the very long run, and it requires the conservation of both non-renewable and renewable resources. So we need to conserve as much as we can for the non-renewable resources. Also, following this principle, we would conserve more renewable resources than the discounted utilitarianism. After discussing three principles to achieve sustainability, so here I have a question: is market failure harmful to sustainability? Let's think about the open access. It is one type of market failure, and when there is open access, everyone would have incentive to catch fish until there is no fish stock. So that is the market failure from the open access problem. And remember, we talk about the definition of sustainability. It refers to maintaining the ability of the environment and the economy to continue to produce and satisfy needs and wants into the future. So let's see those two graphs to understand the impact of open access on sustainability. The left graph shows the relationship between the number of fish caught and the number of fishing boats. So when the number of boats is less than or equal to 3, then there is constant average yield. What does that mean? That means the average number of fish caught by each boat is constant. Suppose there is only one boat and the total number of fish caught by one boat is 4. And suppose there are 2 boats, then the total number of fish is 8. The average is 4. If the number of boats is 3, then the average is still 4. So that is the constant average yield mean. However, when we increase the number of boats, the average yield just decreases. Suppose there are 4 boats, then the average yield would be 15 over 4, which is less than 4. And suppose there were 6 boats, then the average would be 18 over 6, and the average is 3. So that is what I mean. Each boat goes out, brings back a smaller amount of fish than the previous one. And for the 7th boat, the total number caught by 7 boats is less than what was caught by 6 boats. And it is in the range of absolutely decreasing yield. Then let's see the right graph. It is corresponding to the left one, and at this point we call this maximum sustainable yield because the yield is maximized at this point, and the area left to this point is sustainable. The area right to this point is unsustainable. Why? Because when we are in this range, the fish stock, they just have the ability to reproduce themselves. However, when we are in this area, the fish stock, they lose the ability, they cannot handle the reproduction, so we would overuse the resources. So that is the meaning of unsustainability. Then we are going to talk about two sustainability criteria. The first one is called strong sustainability, and then the weak sustainability. Strong sustainability means maintaining or increasing the natural capital stocks across generations, and human capital cannot substitute the natural stock. More extreme version, it is a more extreme version of ecological economics. So for this one, maintaining or increasing natural capital stock across generations, we can think about some development paths as B. So the human well-being is increasing all the time. So the weak sustainability means maintaining total capital stocks, include natural and man-made stocks across generations. Human capital and natural resources are substitutable. This criteria, the weak sustainability, is constant with Rosen-type approach. Then we are going to talk about another rule for sustainability. It is called Hartwig rule, which is also constant with Rosen sustainability approach. So it is aimed to, and there is another rule called Hartwig's rule, which is also closely related to Rosen-type approach. So it aims to achieve constant consumption over generations. Each unit of natural resource extracted should be replaced by a unit of man-made capital. And that means per capita consumption is constant, and in most cases the replacement is based on the trade with each other. So then we are going to talk about the role of trade. The effect of trade on sustainability is mixed. The trade theory implies that countries will have a comparative advantage in goods production or in trade with factors that are in relative abundance. And I would talk about the effects of trade on sustainability in three aspects as we analyze the concept of sustainability: environment, economic, and social. First, trade and economics. So according to World Bank and WTO, developing countries made up 48% of world trade in 2015, which is greater than 33% in 2000. And meanwhile, the number of people living in extreme poverty was cut in half between 1990 and 2015. So that is the benefit from trade, and there are also some other benefits like creating jobs, promoting economic growth and poverty, lowering prices for products. So in general, trade would have many positive effects on our economic growth. However, the relationship between trade and our social interests is far more mixed. The economic benefits of trade can empower people to address major social needs in their communities or in their countries, like protecting human rights, improving working conditions, or achieving gender equality. Trade agreements and rules also have the potential ability to serve as social safeguards, but on the other hand, those trade agreements can also lead to worsening working conditions. So think about the North American Free Trade Agreement as an example. It is a free trade agreement negotiated by the governments of the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and entered into force in January 1994. So on the one hand, it is very good because it protects workers' rights, it improves local economics, but on the other hand, it also creates more pollution to the society, or it also emits more CO2 greenhouse gases. So that is one example of the trade agreement and the positive and the negative effects of this trade agreement on the local society. Then we are going to talk about the relationship between trade and environment. A country with looser environmental regulations may attract dirty industries because the loss there decreases the costs of production. And from industry's point of view, countries with looser regulation have a greater tolerance for pollution or for greenhouse gases emission, and have more inputs to production. So here the input means the environment, and those developing countries are the heavens for pollution because they fail to control the negative externality. So otherwise they will lose the market share, and they just regard the environment as an input. So those types of free trade, like developing countries importing dirty industries, just lead to overall degradation of the environmental quality, because the cost to pollution is very low. And we call this race to bottom hypothesis because those developing countries will have an incentive to pollute, and they regard this as a way to keep those dirty industries and keep competitive in the world market. And the relationships between per capita well-being and environmental degradation are very interesting. What I mean is that the relationship may be positive, negative, or no relationship, depends on the type of pollutants. So this inverted U-curve represents the relationship between for example, SO2 and per capita GDP. So as we can see from this graph, pollution increases in early stages of development. Pollution and per capita GDP increases at the same time, and then the pollution starts to decline. So this specific case happens in many developed countries. And when we think about the relationship between pollution and social well-being, we need to think about the self-correcting or self-cleaning ability of the environment. That means when there is a little amount of the pollution, then the environment just can clean it easily. However, if the pollution level exceeds the limit, then the environment may not be able to handle those type of pollution, and then the pollution would be harmful for human well-being. So the second type of environmental Kuznets curve is monotonically decreasing. That means pollution continuously decreases with economic growth. So as we can see from this graph, the pollution is decreasing all the time, while the per capita GDP is increasing all the time. So this relationship is typical for water pollution. We need safer water when the society is well developed. And the third type of Kuznets curve is monotonically increasing. Let's see from this graph, the pollution is increasing continuously with higher per capita GDP. And this relationship is typical for greenhouse gas emissions because we cannot stop ourselves from producing CO2. And that's all for this video. We just talk about sustainable development, some criteria for sustainability and some rules for sustainability, the relationship between the social well-being and the pollution. That's all, and let me know if you have any questions.